A gaggle of federal Liberals showed up in Edmonton to announce their salvation for Alberta's oil patch. Oh, but it's not a pipeline, it's a big fat handout. Canada's Liberal Natural Resources Minister Amarjeet Sohi and the Diversification Minister Jim Carr both took to the podium in Edmonton to announce their solution to the crisis their government caused in Canada's oil patch. Their solution is welfare. The feds are dishing out what they call a $1.6 billion investment in supporting Alberta's oil patch. Now, here are the nuts and bolts of what they're giving us, or should I say giving back to us, because this is actually our money to begin with. Export Development Canada will provide $1 billion in commercial financing to oil and gas exporters. The Business Development Bank of Canada will also provide $500 million in commercial financing over the next 3 years to help high-risk but viable small oil and gas companies. Hang on for a second here. These are just bank loans. These aren't grants or subsidies. It's not exactly the generous help the Liberals are saying it is. Now, lastly, the feds are dishing out $50 million for clean growth programs. Of course they are. When Sohi took to the podium, he started off his speech in Edmonton by, of course, doing what he always does, rewriting history. He said his government stands with the energy sector, and he said they, quote unquote, always have, always will. Now that is weird, because I sort of remember when Justin Trudeau said this just a little over a year and a half ago. Just listen.
We can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow. We need to phase them out. We need to manage the transition off of our dependence on fossil fuels. That is going to take time.
I also remember when the Liberals brought forward an order in council to kill the Northern Gateway pipeline, and then they tried to rewrite history again, saying that the courts were responsible for the death of the pipeline. And you don't hire people like Gerald Butts and Zoe Caron, both formerly of the World Wildlife Fund, to be chief advisors to anybody when you care about the oil patch. And look, don't get me wrong, $1.6 billion is certainly a lot of money, especially when it is backstopped by taxpayers who shouldn't be paying for any of this at all. Especially when canceling the pipeline-killing Bill C-67 and repealing all the bizarre social justice regulations put into new pipeline approvals will cost absolutely nothing to the taxpayer. But this all needs some perspective. This money needs some perspective. According to Natural Resources Canada, their data from the federal government says that revenue from oil and gas in 2016 was $10.3 billion. That's to the federal government. So the federal government is giving the entire industry back just 1/10 of what it has sent to the feds. But here's a little more perspective for what this $1.6 billion handout really means across an entire industry. The Energy East pipeline, that's the one the Liberals ended up killing because they changed the rules in the pipeline approval process halfway through. Well, that one pipeline alone would cost nearly $16 billion. And that's private sector money. It costs anywhere around $10 billion to get a single refinery up and built. $1.6 billion spread across the entire oil patch is really pennies. It's a drop in the bucket. It's really nothing in an oil field budget. But the worst part is, it's not something that Albertans want or ever asked for. The tone-deaf announcement from Minister Sohi just shows us how little the Liberals actually understand the West. And that includes Liberals from the West, like Sohi himself. We don't want to become Bombardier the province. We don't want government handouts. We don't want a GM-style bailout. We don't want corporate cronyism for big corporations, which is just pulled from the pockets of the very families who are losing their jobs right now. Albertans don't want welfare. We want jobs. And we want the federal government to get out of the way of what we in Alberta do best, building pipelines and making oil. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. What you just saw there is the daily video that I do here at The Rebel, but did you also know that I have my own weekly full-length show? It's aptly called The Gun Show, where we talk about issues facing Canadians in a way that you will never see done in the mainstream media. But to get access to my show and the rest of our incredible premium content, treat yourself to a Rebel subscription this Christmas.